welcome, Nick and John. I've been hearing over and over again how 2020 really accelerated plans that people thought they'd probably get to in maybe 5 years or 10 years, but it really moved things fast and a lot of transformation with that. John, what's transformed? What's moved faster than you thought you would with this era that we're in?
Lisa, for those of us who are working in the public relations communications space, I think that we learned in 2020 that an absolute priority was communicating to our own staffs. And this was a huge priority for our clients around the world. I mean, one of the great myths about communication is because you simply have made a statement that anybody's actually understood it. And in the past and up until pretty recently, CEOs will make a pronouncement and expect that their orders are going to be understood and going to be carried out. But this pandemic has brought about a huge change. And people working from home, people living in all kinds of different conditions right around the world, often very, very harsh, has meant that CEOs and companies have had to move from always doing the talking to doing a great deal more listening than heretofore. And we see this as been a big trend going forward. And we've learned in a way that we've had to learn very quickly is that communications really starts at home in our own organizations. And we've got to be really authentic about the way in which we message our own staff.
And Nick, same question to you. What transformations were accelerated in the past year for your organization or for you?
You're right, Lisa. I mean, everything has accelerated, but what struck me, or what's struck me over the last year, is the real desire for change and desire for that acceleration. So if you look at remote working, for example, I think there's been a real desire from people working remotely to work in a much more agile way. I think the boundaries between geographies, between departments, I think there's been a real breakdown of silos. The world feels like a smaller place to all of us who work in a global sense, and I've definitely seen that from our clients and us as our own organisation. There's obviously a desire for social change, especially around Gen Z, around the environment, around racism, around fairness in society. Huge technological change, huge rush from our clients to e-commerce with the decline of traditional retail. And you're right, I think, we see there's much change in that area in the space of a year than we would have seen, or people were forecasting for 4 or 5 years. And above all else, I feel that there's certainly between I think clients and agencies, the agency worlds, there's definitely been a closer partnership over that period. And I think this affects all agencies. I mean, we obviously monitor how we're doing with our clients, but I think this is true in general of all agency relationships. That closeness has definitely come out to the fore over the last year. So those are sort of I suppose, the big observations that I would make over the last year.
Lots of great things to unpack with both of you, but you both touched on it a little bit about how we're changing because of social justice and the needs for that. And I think a lot of corporations for a long time, they've been really wary of jumping into anything political, especially if you're a global organization, because there's a lot to go through. There's cultural sensitivities, there's traditional business. This is how we've always done things. And so in the past year, we've seen so many things percolate and rise up with, we've had I'm in Canada, but neighboring to the US, seeing especially there with Black Lives Matter become a global issue and a global concern and a global focus. We've also seen, more and more people, as John said, want to speak up about social justice, not just outside in our neighborhoods, but inside in our corporations and what's systemic. Big conversation. What do you see as, the conversation going on with Black Lives Matter, with, women's rights, with things like that? Is it just short term, or are we going to start thinking about it more and more for agencies, and it's going to become embedded in the conversations we have with our clients?
Well, I'll start. Maybe John can join in, but it's definitely not for the short term. So I would say it's definitely here to stay. I mean, what struck me, just look at the Super Bowl in February and look at the advertising in Super Bowl and how political the advertising was in, you know, in the Super Bowl commercials. Brands are being much, much braver around social change, you know, in general, I think. And the brands that are going to succeed, in my view, those are the ones that are going to be really sure-footed around these subjects. They realise that Gen Z generation are not going to accept platitudes in those areas, in my view. So it's a time to really double down and be really brave, I think, for brands right at this moment in time.
Yeah, I completely agree with Nick and Lisa. I think it's a fantastic question. I mean, for me, long after the pandemic is something in the rear view mirror, I would hope that 2020 will be the year that we took DE&I seriously for the first time. And of course, whether it's the advertising industry, the PR industry, or indeed so many technology firms do not have an impeccable record when it comes to DE&I. Now is the moment, now is the chance, and we've got to get really, really serious about it. And saying, for example, that we as firms can no longer find the talent, that we can no longer find the African-American or the Asian or whatever talent, that is no longer an acceptable answer. To be able to say when it's down to the last two candidates, the candidate who is African-American doesn't fit with our culture, that's not the right answer anymore. So this is something that we ought to grasp. And I'm hugely excited about it personally, because if and when Fleishman-Hillard begins to look differently, we'll behave differently, and as a consequence, we can do a really stellar job for our clients because we are made up of society as it is, rather than just a homogenous, vanilla, all-white organization. And for example, within our agency, we've created a group called Mosaic, where we've now got over 100 counselors who are advising clients around the world on issues to do with DE&I. So I am very excited about the possibilities of what we can do, how we can transform our businesses in the months and the years to come. But it is incredibly important that we make real progress very soon, because otherwise, if we don't make the progress this year now, we're going to still be talking about it in 3-4 years' time, and we won't look any different.
That's true. And D&I, diversity and inclusion conversations are rather challenging. And when we have them with our clients, we often have to expose our own biases and think about things in a deeper way too. So those are challenging conversations that we're really all having and coming to the table with. So it's a lot of unpacking this year, isn't it?
It's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah, yeah. As a woman, though, I'm excited about some of these things, but I'm also skeptical and critical and seeing, are we actually going to do it? Are you hearing a lot of companies also ask you about more? And I think, John, you started talking a little bit about more soft skills, those traditional woman skills where we have empathy and listening skills. Are they asking for thinking and values-based campaigns and ideas around that, where we're trying to show our emotional intelligence a little bit more? Are you seeing that, Nick? John, over to you.
I would definitely say that, you know, when it comes to gender as well, obviously in the UK, we've just published the gender pay gap. And what's clear is that's increased over the course of, you know, the pandemic. So the gap has actually widened. So things are getting worse, not better, you know, in that area. So, and clearly we need to start working extremely hard on equaling that up, especially across Western. All the research I've seen is when you've got a diverse, gender-balanced organisation, companies do better when they reflect society. I've not seen any other research publish anything else. So, and John's exactly right, we need to push for change now, not in the future, and organisations need to get behind it. And I think that comes from within the organisations. The people that work in my organisation want to work with clients that have diversity and inclusion and gender balance on their, you know, on their agenda. And a lot of the contracts, I believe, moving forward are going to be built around these kind of things, that we do have a gender balance team working on the business, for example, that diversity and inclusion is incorporated in the type of advertising that we publish. And all clients are looking at that issue right at this moment in time. And I've no doubt that it will move forward at pace in the next few years.
Lisa, I mean, I concur with all of that, but I agree with your premise that emotional intelligence is in the ascendancy. And of course, when our organizations, as Nick says, when they truly reflect gender balances, then we are much more likely to bring forward a much more balanced perspective. I mean, there's still some way to go in terms of wage parity. And again, the sooner the better we bridge that gap. I mean, certainly in terms of our organization, the majority of those in leadership are female, and it's something that we are very proud of. But all my career, from the time way back when I was a broadcast journalist, and I was always surrounded by strong women, and long may it last.
Just to cover, one point in terms of, because I do think listening is really important, and I think what and those softer skills, and I think we talked about it slightly earlier, and I do think if you listen to what the younger people in our organisation are saying, they're saying you have a window of opportunity. So I don't think that they want leaders to be defensive about this issue. They want them to be open and honest that we have a problem. And I think then we'll be granted time to fix that problem, but we do have to show progress across it. So I think listening and those softer skills are incredibly important, as you said.
Great. So it's that a little bit more transparency is part of our transformation in this time then too, is what I'm hearing. So that's great advice. Do you feel too that agencies, companies like ours are being brought to, not just, we're being brought more deeper into the organizations, and it's not just afterwards to clean up things, or we're really helping progress things deep internally now? Are you getting the sense, John? Are you feeling that?
Sure, absolutely, because everything is moving right now at such pace. And we're now coming up for a year, for example, from the murder of George Floyd, when CEOs were expected to take a stand, have a view. And throughout the remainder of this year, there will be a series of anniversaries around the world in various countries where CEOs are being expected to, again, have a view. In America, coming up, Veterans Day, for example, how certain companies took a stand on that. Will they take the same stand on this occasion? So for us, CEOs find themselves in a situation where more and more they are expected to take a stand, to take a position, and they've got to decide on, am I taking a stand on this one or that one, or do I take a stand on every single one of them? And it's hard for a lot of CEOs because they are not politicians. They are not, they haven't grown up in the same way. They're not used to having to find those kind of skills that politicians have in terms of ducking and diving and so on. And of course, then the whole issue that so many senior management have is that if they do make a comment, there will always be so many people, no matter what you say, disagree with you. So they then can become the subject of huge amounts of abuse on social media, no matter what stand you take on whatever issue.
Yeah, there's always someone on the other side of that. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right that there's a difficulty with that. But my advice in that situation is be authentic. There's no point in trying to join the bandwagon of a campaign if there's no authenticity, at that point for any leader in an organization or the organization itself. So it's got to sort of prepare itself and be, it's got to come from its sort of DNA, and that should be their guide, I think, when answering questions along those lines, I would say.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think it's a lot, we have to ask leaders and ask people to really go in and reflect on their own values. And a lot of people haven't done that work. We've done the values for the company, we have the mission and vision, but really for reflecting back on their values and making them go deeper into what is the meaning of the work that they want to contribute to society, and making them reflect on that. It's actually quite revealing sometimes. So are you having those challenging conversations then when you're counseling your clients a little bit deeper then?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you know, matching, I think brands are looking to try and be sure-footed, and I think we're advising our clients to be brave on issues. It's not good enough not to decide. So, you know, we had a lot of discussions around, you know, Facebook and the promotion of social media and, you know, the whole Facebook ban, advising our clients, you know, along those times. And really what we're trying to not telling clients what to do, but we're sitting by their side and really advising them based on what they feel and what's in their, you know, what's in their brand's DNA. And I think that, as I say, I think it comes down to that more than anything. It's what's in their heart. I think most clients want to see change, and I think that they should promote that. And I think we, you know, most of us, in whatever job, in whatever leadership position you are, you know, you want to change the world for the better, don't you? You've got an opportunity as a leader of any business to change the world, your world, and shape your environment around you. And I think now's the moment really in this environment where we can really supercharge that. So, and I think if you look at it that way, it's quite an inspiring time to live. You know, I grew up in the 80s in a very political in the UK, in a very political time. And it sort of reminds me a bit of that. You know, when I was younger, I think the speed of change that's going to happen both socially, economically and politically over the next few years is going to be incredibly exciting. And I do believe the world will become a fairer, better place because of it.
And I mean, it's really interesting what Nick is saying. Nick is speaking from the UK today. I'm speaking from Ireland, where I've been back home and working for part of the pandemic. But normally I reside in the Midwest of the United States. And one has to be hugely cognizant that in the DNA of so many organizations and so many CEOs is very, very different spectrum of political views. Again, Nick talked about the word authentic, and I think organizations need to be authentic, and in many cases that means they are very conservative, and then in others they are much more liberal. And it's been a very interesting tension for somebody like me I've been going to work in America all my adult life, but living in the Midwest of America over the last 5 years of highly charged political atmosphere has been hugely illuminating for me.
So as we move towards the end of our conversation, I think I've heard a lot of things that you want to keep going in this world that we've learned in this era. While it was very challenging for a while, there are some things that came out of this. So supercharge and transparency and being authentic and things like that. Anything else that you personally do hope that is some good that we can continue forward besides the things that you've already mentioned? Anything else that you'd want for yourself or for your clients or for the world?
Well, Nick talked at the start of this chat about work-life balance, and I think it's really important for us to remember that across all of our organizations, for those of us who are lucky enough to be able to work, because I'm very mindful there are millions of people out there have been unable to work over the last year, but for those of us who work across the board, productivity has increased very significantly. But a year on, we can now see it's coming at a real cost. And people are very, very tired. People are really stressed. And I'm not sure that as of yet, we've been able to find the balance from working from home in order that people really do take time off while they're at home. The day has got longer, people are working into the weekends, and we all, I think as managers, need to work much harder to persuade our staff, our employees, that they need to take time off, they need to take time away, because otherwise the kinds of productivity that we've experienced over the last year, no matter what industry you're in, is simply not sustainable because of the huge cost to people's mental health. So I hope we get a much better balance on that front, because working from home, hybrid working is going to be with us for a very long time into the future.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think mental health is the one big issue, big topic that we're going to have to resolve coming out of this. I mean, we have a worldwide network of mental health allies to help our people And I think that has stood us in good stead. But I see people all the time suffering in the, suffering in that way. So I couldn't agree more. I suppose my other thing is for a much more sort of agile working environment where people don't work in traditional teams anymore, and work in traditional ways. I want to see, as I'm in a global role, what I've seen and what's benefited us is that closeness between global to local. I think that those barriers are being broken down all the time. I also think barriers between traditional departments and those silos you get in organisations are being broken down. So it's a hugely exciting time, I think, to rewrite how organisations can work and work together and partner, in a much better way. And I think that technological change, I suppose, with us all working remotely, has sort of has shone light on maybe there's a different way of doing this. And that, I think, is hugely exciting for people as well.
What a great word to end on, that there's a different way of doing this. So instead of always being competitive, being collaborative, and really thinking about how we can do business in a different way for our own staff and for our clients and for the world, and making the world just a little bit better in any way we can, and making sure that we're taking care of each other in our well-being and the fabric of our society. So thank you so much for the conversation today. Toronto, back to you.